Hi, and welcome to the Diablo podcast, your home for Diablo diehards, tryhards, casual, and hardcore alike. I am your host, Xanth, and I am joined today by my lovely co-host, Nightball.
Oh, hi.
And if you're like, hey, where have you guys been? We did a podcast. We did a whole ass podcast 2 weeks, a week and a half ago.
It was last week. It was last week.
Was it last
Yeah.
week? This week has already
Yeah.
felt like a month. So we did it, and my audio wasn't great. And
Let's be honest. It was my puns. My puns were just too bad. Rush refused to publish it.
we've we've killed a
It
few podcasts that way. Um,
yeah.
no, but in all truth, my audio was not great, and I've seen the comments. We are always trying to get better, and it was just not of the quality that I thought was worth putting out there. The conversation was great. It was like a great little treat for me, but it wouldn't have been great to listen to, and we scrapped it. And that just kind of happens. We don't make our money off of this, um, but we still want it to be of a good enough quality that you could pay for it. So we scrapped it, but we're here to chat. We're going to talk about the most recent season. We're going to talk about a recent play, and we're going to talk about the new expansion that we just heard from Rod Ferguson at Dice a few days ago. And then we're going to have a big conversation around, is Diablo too easy? So buckle up. Let's hope this one works this time. And let's talk to you with the boys. So, Namba, the season's been going for a little bit. What have you been up to? How's it been going? And any major accomplishments as of late?
Oh, you set that one up pretty good.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, it's been pretty good. This one is probably been like some of the most I've done in a season in a very long time. Because I jumped on the meta bandwagon with the Blood Wave Necro, and it was like, is this what I miss by just playing Sever every season and not that the Necromancer has been like the game breaking build, for many seasons, but like this season, like it is, and just like it was a world of difference. And so I had fun being overpowered and just like, the pants dropped, and then 30 seconds later, I'm in tier 4, and I haven't had any difficulties since then.
So
Um,
it took you 30 seconds after your pants drop, and then you didn't have any difficulty. I got you.
oh yeah,
I got you. See,
yeah,
yep, this is where we're
exactly, yeah.
going. This is
This
where we're
see
going
this
today.
see this is why we cut the last episode, was because I was the one making the jokes, but we are doing this episode because he gets to make the jokes.
Well, I had a week, an extra week to prepare, so I wrote those out, and I'm ready. I'm ready to go. Um, yeah, I think Necromancer's in a cool spot this season.
Hmm.
It's weird, when we tread this weird territory because we've had some of these conversations before, but I started the season as a companion druid. I got to level 58, and I just don't love it. I really want the druid to be in a different spot, and like trying to play companions feels like you are just putting two Lego bricks together that don't quite match. It
Hmm.
sure it's serviceable, but like a companion druid, in my opinion, should still play a lot like a minion necromancer, and all it does
That's a,
feel like,
that's a bad comparison right now.
I know. I'm thinking, more in the classic of like D2. When you play Diablo 2, a companion or a zoo druid and a skeletal army necro play very similar. You just have different minions essentially. At the moment, the way a companion druid plays is I just feel like I'm casting wolves at things. It may as well, it could be a lightning bolt, it could be a fireball. It's not a companion piece because when they're idle, they don't really feel like they're doing that much. it's when I'm casting them is when they're super effective, and then you want to like bring your cooldown time, down to zero and all that. But it just the feel of it isn't right. So I ended up abandoning the druid, and I rolled a necromancer. I haven't played a necro seriously since maybe season two, when I was really trying to get like blood mist going in hardcore.
Mhm.
And I have played the entirety of the season without one hardcore death. I took that necro all the way to tier four. I've killed everything that I possibly could. I think I'm like Paragon 200 or so. Sure, my glyphs could always be higher, but I got that season journey done. I got everything all checked off, and leveled up a rogue in between, because leveling an alt is super easy. Just keep stockpiling those caches and cash them in.
Yeah.
Okay.
This you're not beating the allegations.
It's all true. Um,
I also leveled a rogue this season.
Good to you.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I think it got to about level 5 before I got the 50 kills that I needed for the trophy, and then
that's
deleted the
right.
character. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That's fair. That's fair. But it was easy. I just wanted to play something a little bit faster than a Necromancer, just for a change. And I ended up leveling that Druid up to 60, and then your account-wide Paragon as well. And then the season kind of settled. It felt complete. And
Hmm.
is that a sentiment that you think you have felt with this season? Like,
Oh
you
yeah.
got into tier four, you got
Uh,
those pants, and the season itself, you wrapped up the journey. We got that sweet Raven pet.
oh yeah.
It just feels
Absolutely amazing Raven pet.
it feels done though, right?
Oh yeah. I so this is like when you were said that we were like retreading familiar territory because of, conversations that we had last week, and so it's like in my brain it's like we already talked about this, but no, we didn't. Scratch that. Uh, that this was one of those ones where it's like because I was just so overpowered, I was able to get so many of my season like the season journey. Um, was this was like the easiest it was to complete, even though technically this is one of the hardest. Since like the destroyer chapter of the season journey required everything to be done on Torment 4. And it was just like looking back, if I wasn't playing the super overpowered build, I might still be grinding it out now to try and get everything done. Um, but because I had access to this, wondrous thing that is the Bloodwave Necro, that wasn't an issue. I actually had to stop myself from going through and doing things that I was enjoying, such as I did enjoy the Witch Tide zones, going through and just messing around in the pit, just casually doing some like 100s or so because I felt like it. That I had to stop and be like, why am I still like stuck on Slayer? And it was like, oh, I have to do Hell Tides. And it was like I had to do Hell Tides in order to actually like complete the seasonal journey. And there was like a couple of like odd steps there where you kind of like got stuck having to do things or go out of your way to do specific things, hunting, going into nightmare dungeons to hunt Forgotten Altar or something along those lines. That even though technically nightmare dungeons are like the best source of obsite right now, it still don't want to do them. I'd still rather do the Infernal Hordes. Um, but just kind of like having to stop the loop that I had going on with playing to do a couple of things just to unlock the seasonal journey. So it was like a breeze, kind of like nonchalantly, accidentally completed it while having fun. And then yeah, once I actually got the destroyer done, it was kind of like I'm happy. I got I could push higher. I just speed ran a couple of GR 100s, sorry, pit 100s. Um, that it just to level up some glyphs and get everything to like 50ish or so, and then kind of got bored of that and doing some other things. And then I realized I was actually really close to getting the platinum trophy on the PlayStation version of the game because predominantly have always played on PC. This season I was playing on the PlayStation. I was like, let me just go and do a couple of things, which I have to say thank you for allowing me to kill you in PvP. to complete the platinum journey.
Now,
Um,
I want to point out that was actually a lot of fun
yeah.
because we had to do it in standard because I that's where my softcore characters reside, and
Hmm.
I picked up a Spirit Born that I haven't touched them since last season, and I was playing the evade build. So when we go into the fields, and I'm just like, well, let's see if it's how effective it is, and I do a couple quick evades, and suddenly you were dead. I'm like, oh,
Yep.
sorry, but also I'm gonna make you earn it from here on out.
Yeah. So it was the problem of you would two shot me, but you attacked incredibly fast, and me being on the console with the console aiming is like, you can't really line up a shot to where you're going to be, and so Sever just would cast where you're at, but I just had to nick you,
Yeah,
like yeah, it was
that
like
that's
just
all it took.
just a tad, just a little touch. So yeah, that was a fun couple of minutes.
And nobody else was in the zone. Um,
No.
at PvP, like if we're gonna, we can put down some flags here to kind of come back to. PvP in Diablo needs something,
Yeah.
um,
And I
because
preemptively just have to say, I'm sorry, nerd words, that we're having this conversation while you're
he
not
would
here.
have loved it. He would have really
Yeah.
loved to have been there, but he was, I don't know, doing stuff, I guess. Yeah.
Spending time with his significant other, like who does that?
I'm 90% sure he was logged into Diablo during that time. It was too busy playing Diablo to come play Diablo with us. So think about that. But yeah, planting a flag down, PvP is something that I think you and I like. It was fun. It was fun to kind of go and battle with each other. The current system that's in place, I feel no incentive to ever go to that area and engage in, despite it there being this kind of fun interplay of trying to outmaneuver an opponent or something like that. It being contained to a massive area and the way it is laid out currently just is not exciting, and it's something that I just actively avoid. And the way the open world works, it becomes very easy to forget it even exists. And
Mhm.
sound off as you guys are listening. You're like, tell me truthfully, do you remember that PvP exists in this game? Because I kind of, if it wasn't for that achievement, I almost completely forgot. I was like, oh yeah, that's right, we can fight each other.
So I will say, it's like prior to Vessel of Hatred, it was one of those ones that it was actually really easy after like the first week. It was really easy to get some of the later chapters of the seasonal journey done, to just go and do some of the PvP achievements, because they didn't actually involve killing players. It was just like collecting shards or killing the boss that roams around the zone a couple of times. And so that was like a easy, sneaky way of going through and, completing the seasonal journey chapters. And I feel as if that was like the majority of the reason that people ever even stepped foot inside the PvP zones, because I think it was I think it was like even like season 5, going there to like go through and complete some things, and I would run into a couple of people in the PvP zone, and we would just avoid each other. And like, so I would see, the font going off on this side of the map. I'm just not gonna go over there. And then, I would do the font, and no one would come and bother me. There's obviously someone else in this zone, and we're just going and doing our own thing. We're playing PvE, PvP.
Right.
So
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna bother them having a good time. I'll get my stuff later. All right, so let's plant that flag. We'll come back to that one later. The season itself, right? So I think for both of us, the season has kind of ended, which I'll lament later. I think this is the quickest I've gone through a Diablo season. I think that does
mhm.
make me kind of sad, and I would love more to drive me to play. I I have completed the season's journey before and felt like I still needed to do things in the game in every other
Yeah.
season. This is the first time that I've finished that season journey and been like, all right, I'm gonna boot something else up. Like
Yeah.
I had a snow day yesterday. It was a snow day here. We got like 8 inches of snow. It was awesome.
It
I
was
played
84 degrees yesterday.
just two different worlds, Nineball. Two different worlds.
Yeah.
I got to use my snowblower. I was so jazzed. I haven't used that in like a year. I got this thing. It pushes snow, and it is awesome. Um,
Take your word for it.
yeah, you would have no idea how this thing even functions. Like, what's the
No.
point? Um, but I spent what 6 hours yesterday just playing Metaphor. I saw you were online. You were playing Armored Core. Um,
Yeah, which I also platinumed that yesterday.
Look at that. I've had like two trophies left on that, and I just haven't came back to it. But like normally there's something in a season to kind of that gets me driving and striving for, and might be like repeated hardcore deaths are a great
Mhm.
way for me to stretch out a season because like maybe I just got too good. Maybe I'm just like too good now where I'm not dying. That's a
Totally.
very real possibility. But that'll again another flag planted for a later conversation. But it is kind of sad because there are a lot of good things about this season. I think the witch powers are a nice kind of callback to the season
Mhm.
of the construct, having these nice cool little upgrades. The gems, nice little callback to season one, in which you've got these gems to kind of strive and feel the need to craft and make your character a little
And
bit better.
it also shows that you can do more with gem slots than just plus stats, plus alt res, and plus armor. Please, these witchcraft gems have to stay in some shape or fashion. The gems can be a lot more interesting than just plus stats.
Best we can do is put it on a pair of boots. That's all we got. Got new
Sadly.
aspects. Um, but I do I like all the parts of the season. I just don't like the speed at which it has come down, and I think that here we are. I mean, it's February 13th for you, Leviathan, and it feels like we're doing an end of season recap, like in the preparation for the season to come. But there's still several months left in it. Um,
Yeah, we don't even have the mid-season update yet.
right, which again, like it doesn't feel right for a massive seasonal content. And on the flip side, like if we're looking at numbers, and we don't know how many people play a typical Diablo season, but there's a few metrics that you can look at. And like I think Twitch viewership is in some ways like a microcosm of like who's paying attention to a game. This was like the lowest viewed I've ever seen a Diablo season. Um, not as many people were streaming it either, and that does kind of just it's jutting up against Path of Exile, but there just wasn't as much interest in it. And then you combine it with a season in which people can kind of complete a little bit faster, and it doesn't feel as meaty. And I think there is a lot of stuff there. It's just too quick.
Yeah. I think that's we had a lovely conversation last week going through and talking about like the power scaling of the game, and it's something I brought up on previous episodes about there's like just way too many multiplicative modifiers, and that the entire game has come into how many multiplicative modifiers can I stack. And this one, going and playing a overpowered build, like Blood Wave, I guess was kind of like one of those things that I had to like stop at one point and kind of like think back, where it's like I probably like I'm now here I am. I'm done with the season. I've done, I finished the seasonal journey. I probably would still be stuck on like Torment 2, maybe Torment 3 with like the amount of play time that I had if I was still playing like my own like version of a Sever build or something that wasn't like super meta chasing. And it was like, would I be having as much fun with this season if I was stuck struggling through it? Because like I said, technically this is a much harder to complete seasonal journey. Would I be having as much fun? Would I have put as many hours as I did? Because I did put in like a lot of hours for me at least. This particular season, with work and everything else going on with my schedule, that I was excited to play, because I was powerful. But then at the same time, where in previous seasons, uh I would kind of like you'd get the build together and such while still progressing through the difficulties and progressing through the seasonal journey. Whereas this one, I kind of like put the cart before the horse because I was just like done with all of the entire game and I've done everything that I need to. Everything's like 12-12. I got, really good, I have really good gear. Everything's ancestral. I still, I found since our last conversation, I did find one mythic unique that I sharded because it was a Doombringer. Um, but it was like besides the mythics, I felt as if I had like really really good gear, the best that I could ever want. I have double passive amulet, all other type of stuff. It was and I just kind of like it's the same thing that I would burn out in Diablo 3, where it's like, okay, I have a great set of gear, everything's going well. I've gotten, my GR 100 down. I don't really care about trying to push as high as I need to. And, I'm kind of done because there's nothing else for me besides finding the same gear that I have that's just better rolled. And so that doesn't as entice me to keep wanting to search, for replace my 2 GA piece with a 3 GA piece, or getting a 4 GA unique, or trying to farm 6 jaw runes to actually craft the mythic that I need. Despite the Lunar Festival did kind of make that a little bit easier, while it's still going on, that you can, every time that you complete that last tier cache, you do get a guaranteed legendary rune. But yeah, still that wasn't enough to get me to do it more than like once or twice.
Right. Right.
Yeah, because it's just like, yeah, there's too many legendary runes. I'm not getting jaws out of this, and
No.
I don't really care about trading. So that's it. I'll just have to settle for not getting a heir to perdition or the chest that everyone uses.
Proud.
I think it's called, yeah, shroud. There you go.
And Alexander wept, for there were no new worlds left to conquer. Yeah,
Apt. Yeah.
I think like as a counter to your point though, because like there is that like, well, maybe if I didn't follow the meta.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of like the necromancer, I think the blood wave is so easy to put together that even ineffectively, it's still very overpowered, that like you could have stumbled on it
Mm-hmm.
naturally. And the other classes though are similar. You can fall into an overpowered build in most classes. It seems like ultimates themselves have been bumped up. Like people really liked the Spiritborn, and the Spiritborn has a very integrated system with their ultimates, where they didn't seem like
Mm-hmm.
overpowered, but it felt like just a very cool thing. And everybody else's ultimates were not that.
Yeah.
And yes, we were able to put points into them last season, but they still weren't compensating by comparison. And it seems like now, with the integration of new items and then the witch powers, every class has an ultimate or so that you can bump up to get you into that Torment 4 where you really start rolling and everything is fine. Like, obviously, Druid right now is destroying everything with Cataclysm, right?
Cataclysm.
And the Cataclysm build has been online for a while, but it's been pushed to a whole new level this season. For Necro, it is Bloodwave. For
And it's funny that you go through and you talk about that because last season when they introduced the Soul Rift for the Necromancers, that one was something that showed up like literally in every build. Not so much because of like the amount of damage that it did. And you could set it up to do pretty good damage, but just because it gave you like infinite shielding and infinite essence, and that was one of those things that just really propped up almost any. It just you could slot it into almost anything, literally.
right. So I think, there is that uh, the waxing of like the halcyon days of the pre-internet, when you just didn't know how to construct a build, and you
Mm-hmm.
could get lost a little. But I feel like the current iteration of Diablo 4 even sans a build guide, you could fall into being overpowered significantly easier than what you could in season two and season three. I felt like
For
in those
sure.
earlier seasons, you had to work to kind of figure out how to do it. Like, I mean, for the Bloodwave build, I I had like 40 plus Paragon points from like level 110 to 150. I didn't even put in my board. I didn't even level up
Wasn't
like
needed.
yeah, I didn't even level up glyphs. It didn't matter really. And
Do you have the Kissimmee in Fast Blood?
that
And
was it.
yeah, welcome to Torment 4.
Right.
You
And
know, yeah.
and you can get that going with other classes as well. Maybe there's like an extra piece along the way, but I just don't think that level of rigor was there by comparison. And
It,
again, we're gonna drop that in. We're gonna drop that flag. We're gonna come back to
yeah.
that at the end.
It's something that does feel very reminiscent of Diablo 3, kind of like
Mm,
the cadence that we've been having with the patches and such, where late into Diablo 3's life that they decided to go back, and after the introduction of the Necromancer, we're gonna go and rebalance the sets, and every new set that they went through and touched that season usually ended up being the overpowered thing, for that particular class that season. And so the two or three classes every season that got their sets revamped were like the big thing. And it seems very much so. You know, it's kind of been trending that way, the last couple of seasons where they would put a little bit of extra polish on a particular skill, either by changing its scaling or adding an additional unique or a new legendary aspect in order to go through and buff it. And this season it does feel like it really took off, because like even though like blood wave is like super overpowered, like the changes that they made to bone were also like really good. If you were playing like a bone spear necromancer, you're also doing like really well, even though you're completely overshadowed by bloodwave. But like it had a really good season right now as well. There's a bunch of stuff of them going through, and you know we're gonna tweak this one particular build, and now all of a sudden like that build is to the moon for that season.
yeah, and it was something that we brought up in the last podcast, but in some ways, Diablo 4 is starting to feel like Diablo 3 with just extra steps, right?
I mean, it's not starting to. It definitely is.
Oh,
We are at that. Oh, we are at that point. We're doing billions, quadrillions, quintillions of damage.
yeah, the damage numbers have completely negated any concept of a stat squish. Leveling, especially with this new season, is definitely truncated. 1 to 60, if we go back to like the start of the game, 1 to 100 was a journey. 1 to 50 was that initial. It took a little while, and they started building those Paragon points. There was an end point in sight, and getting to 100 felt like a cool accomplishment. My character
Hmm.
has now been completed, and I'm trying to find better gear, but I'm not as concerned about certain pieces, or like about like my Paragon board. I still want to level my glyphs and what have you. Now it's pseudo endless, right? You can still hit that end cap, but it doesn't feel like you want to push for it anyway. 1 to 60 is nothing. 1 to 60 is just like Diablo 3 now, where it is I just need to get through it because everything that's happening here doesn't matter. Any piece of gear I find doesn't matter. And like that to me still feels really bad. That feels really bad that a whole part of your game is a thing you need to push through because there's nothing of value to be found in it. It is just an obstacle now. Like, ugh, I don't like that. And then like as a hardcore player, I have to do that way more. And if none of it is uh like as by contrast to like Path of Exile. So Path of Exile, and I apologize for bringing it up on the Diablo podcast, but you have to go through the campaign, and you do it, 1 to 99. Um, but every time you're starting over from 1 to 50, anything like that, you still have a chance to find something that is valuable. You could find an item at level 5 that will be usable all the way to level 90. You find currency that you can use consistently. I will never find something at level 1 or level 58 that I will want to use on my character. And that bums me out. Like, it just says, like, the time that you are spending is wasted because you're not here where the stuff that you would actually use is. I don't like that. I
Yeah.
didn't like it in D3 either.
I guess that's one of those ones where it's like the thought never even occurred to me. For that type of argument, it's not something that I really uh, assign any value to. But it's a similar conversation that I've seen take place a couple of times. So it's like the same thing with like regular like legendaries at the end game. Stopping at 750 and then ancestrals for 800, and so like once you're kind of like decked out in ancestrals, what is the point of picking up something that doesn't have a GA on it? But at the same time, it's like now I don't have to pay attention to all the gear that's dropping. Like I literally can just ignore it and just focus on the things that have the stars. Otherwise, I'm stuck picking up everything and looking at everything because I do remember having to do that. Even when what was it when it was like 925s before. Well, it's like well, I'm just gonna kill Duriel, so that way I don't have to care about looking at every single piece of gear to make sure that it's 925. And then they made the change that everything after what was it level 95 would drop as a 925.
Right. Yeah,
I think
something like
yeah,
that.
and yeah, and so but that's also around when they introduced like the greater affixes, and it became the same thing where it was just like well now the only thing that I care about is going to have a greater affix. So I'm just not going to pick up anything that doesn't have it. And it's kind of like just a progression of tiers, as it
Yeah.
is that, in the lower levels while leveling, I really only care. I'll pick up everything, and then I'll only pick up yellows, and then I'll only pick up legendaries, then I'll only pick up, greater affix gear, and then I'll only pick up 2 greater affix gear, and I'll only pick up, uniques or mythics or whatever,
Right. Right.
you know.
Yeah, there is something about that loot loop that does still feel lackluster, and I think we've talked about it
Mhm.
before, but
Yeah.
we are in some ways pseudo pigeonholed to certain items, and then we have to
Mhm.
spend so much time trying to find a version of it, and then like, all right,
Yeah.
hey, you found that, that's cool.
And then now I have to find a better version of that
R-
same item.
Right, like, hey, it's awesome
Yeah.
that you found that mythic, but it's only got 1 GA. It'd be way better if it had 2 GA. It'd be even better if
Yeah.
it was 3. So just keep grinding. And like from my standpoint, it's like I've already found the item, right?
hmm
Why do I need more of that? And
I
for
I
what
will
purpose?
I will definitely agree with you there because as I said earlier, that's when the loot grind no longer holds any interest to me. I don't want to continue to just find the same gear but better. You know.
Right, right. And I
Yeah.
think that is something that hopefully could be addressed in a future expansion. News coming out of DICE, courtesy of Jason Schreier, friend of the podcast, the Schrei Guy, reported that he attended a little talk by Rod Ferguson talking about Diablo and Vessel of Hatred, that they have a roadmap. So we should be expecting a roadmap of Diablo for the rest of the year coming soon, detailing out the
Before
plans.
season 8.
Yeah, detailing out the plans for the year. And then what we should also expect is that the new expansion is not a part of the 2025 roadmap, but will be slated for 2026. So you were the one who actually sent this to me, Nightball, which it shocked me. What was your initial take first in the hearing this come out of Dice of all locations, and then that it was happening?
Yeah, I guess it's like one of those ones we had talked about it a little bit, prior to the starting of the recording of the show, that it's kind of like weird that it would be announced, announced at Dice, when it's not really an announcement because previously we were told that there would be yearly expansions. Obviously, Vessel of Atrid spoilers ended on a gigantic cliffhanger, and so we knew that there would be other things coming. In so we knew that there would be an expansion on the way, and so it was just kind of like weird that the first talk about it would be at Dice, which is more of a like an industry focused, not for us, the consumers and such. This is more for like, the developers talking to developers and things like that. That we would that would be the first talk that we would have of it, and that it would be 2026, where again, I guess it's like I'm not shocked or anything like that because the talk of annual expansions was made months before the initial release of the game, and obviously we see how much the plans, of for the game itself have changed since launch. That things like expansions and such would also then get shuffled and changed up there, um, and if it takes them longer to put out a better product, it takes them longer to put out a better product, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah, and not gonna complain about that. I think you are right. It is weird to hear it come out of Dice. Not that it's wrong, but it would have been maybe better to kind of hear it from a campfire chat or something like that, or like, hey, save that
Yeah.
for when you're talking about this roadmap. Save that for the roadmap, and then bring that up there, as opposed to in that small room where we're hearing about it from Jason, as opposed to from from them directly. It does feel a little off. My general thought when I saw it is that Rod was just excited. I think like
Mhm.
he's very passionate about Diablo, and I know he does get a lot of criticism along the way. He genuinely loves this game and loves this franchise, and I
I still think that Malignant Tunnel was a pretty good joke.
yeah.
I will go out there and say that.
I mean, I made a joke about you dropping your pants within, like a minute of this podcast starting. So let's face it, we're all kind of Rod Ferguson from time to time.
Hmm.
It, I just, for me, it seems like he was probably, talking and just put it out there because he wanted to say something, like he deviated a little bit from what he originally intended. Like, oh yeah, and then, I'm just you're probably gonna ask about the expansion, and we don't have that context either. We just know that he brought it up, so maybe I'm
Hmm.
making excuses for something that is completely counter to what he actually said, but that would be my general guess, and I'm happy to be proven wrong if I'm wrong in that regard. Um, but you said it before. It's not really an announcement, right? We don't know the name. We don't know the class. We don't have any Raz and Razzmatazz to go with it. It is just, hey, in 2026 is when this is planned. This is when we're going to bring it to the people. Now we can start the speculation of when in 2026 that actually is. Um, because we were already doing that last podcast. We were trying to figure out when's this expansion going to drop. Well, we know it won't be in October, right? We know we will
Yeah.
go a full year. We know October will have its own separate season, and then the logical part of me then goes, well, it won't be January because that will be you know holiday break, and you're coming off of Thanksgiving. So logically, that would then be March or July. And I think that's March. Maybe still feels like July, summer. Sure, why
Yeah.
not? That to me feels like you get a few more seasons, get it where it needs to be, and then drop that in the March. Also, Grand Theft Auto 6 is still set for this year. Who knows if that actually happens? But realistically, it would be late, and maybe they don't want the Diablo expansion dropping in October, and then you have um, Grand Theft Auto in November, or you have Grand Theft Auto around the same time, and who wants to compete with
Yeah.
that right now? Not
I
me.
mean, it's true. There's definitely a lot of things that we don't know what it is that they put into those, forecasts when it's a right time to go through and launch a game versus other big titles.
Yeah, I don't know. I will state that, like, out of the two announcements, am I saddened to not get an expansion this year? Yeah, I think it's always nice to have something to look forward to,
Hmm.
but if we get a roadmap of what the game is planning on doing, then I can be pretty happy with that because
I'll
as
just be excited to get a second expansion for a Diablo game
it's never happened,
for the first time. Yeah.
never happens. Now there are plenty of people in the comments, not our comments, you guys are great, but on the internet that have pointed out that in reality, this expansion is kind of just part two of the first expansion
Just
because,
slightly.
there were some major things that were promised that didn't come to fruition, like a primeval.
Hmm.
So, you know, maybe it isn't the second expansion, it's just the sequel to the expansion.
It's the expansion's expansion.
Yes. So not
Yeah.
technically a second Diablo expansion, but the expansion.
Yeah.
But,
But
what do I know?
yeah, it's like one of those ones where it's like, if the not to say that the actual storytelling in Vessel of Hatred was bad, it was good, but the way that they kind of just left the cliffhanger, that if like that was kind of like the way that the storytelling in the game was going to be going forward from expansion to expansion, and that I'd have to wait multiple years in order to see the conclusion of a story arc, that would get tiring very fast, you know. And so I'm fine with them going through and taking more time if it can go through and be a more robust story and narrative to come out of it. I'm one of like three people that would care about that thing, because the majority of people that you see talk about just space barring every single cutscene and not caring about the story. But there are those of us that do care about that story and that experience in the narrative, and so I would definitely like to see like the narrative team be given more time to flesh those things out. I do also wonder, since we're the world of the estuary is like filled out, or estuar is filled out. There's nothing else to do here. I'm pretty sure that when they went through and they made the base game, that they had already started building Nahantu down below, shared world assets, all other types of stuff, and that. But now you're having to build something else entirely. And so I can see, maybe that is going to take a little bit longer to go through and develop, to travel different continents, islands or wherever it is that you might go. That we'll see a new zone. I hope that we would see a new zone, and that the story doesn't continue to take place, just in the world where we are. But it will be interesting to see, going through with what they've done with the seasons and such, since Nahatu is locked to Vessel of Hatred, and so everything that they're doing in the current seasons has to be completable outside of Nahatu, and that like Helltide, when the Helltide rises there, it is also in another zone. So for people to go through and do stuff, and the world bosses spawn in two locations. Will we have the same thing that if say we go to Scovos or wherever, will we have a Hell tied up in Scovos, in Nahatu, and the Fractured Peaks all at the same time, so people that haven't bought any of the expansions can still you know interact with seasonal mechanics and things of that nature, because like the seasonal storyline has to take place in the base game, from the precedent that they've set so far. They can't have the story taking place anywhere else. And so like even though that's just like the seasonal stories, and they're kind of like pseudo canon. Did it happen? Did it not happen? Is a what if type story, type thing. Um, maybe in the future expansions they'll everyone will be able to go to the new zone, and it'll just be like the class and certain other mechanics that are locked behind the expansion, so that they don't get forever pigeonholed into having to always have the quest focus and like Howzar or something like that.
It's I think you bring up something interesting. With this timetable and multiple seasons in between, I imagine Vessel's price continues to drop and drop and drop, where the people who maybe have been on the fence about adopting will find it easier to justify a, you know, $10 purchase or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
to, maybe buy into whatever the new season might be, or to prep themselves for, in preparation for whatever the new expansion might be, of saying like, hey, we're dropping Vessel down to, like I said, $10. Or, hey, we're just going to activate everybody on Vessel, but you got to buy this new expansion. Or wait another year and a half, or what have you, so that can enjoy the newer experiences. I'd like boats. Maybe instead of mounts, we get boats, customizable boats to take.
Yeah.
That'd be kind of cool. I want a customizable boat. Bring on the boats. Um, okay, so we've got a lot of time to speculate when it comes to an expansion now. We will do a whole year's worth of podcasts for that.
Maybe a year and a half.
Maybe a year and a half, to kind of think about that one. Uh, this is our Valentine's Day episode. We might be doing another Valentine's Day episode talking about the expansion, hopefully with more details next year at this time. That's a wild thought. Next year at this time, for our annual Valentine's Day episode, which we do now. This is
Yep.
this is the Valentine's Day Diablo episode. If you did not know that already, happy Love Day to you. And I hope it was good, because I'm assuming this will come out after. Um, but yeah, next year at this time, we might still very much be talking about what that expansion will entail. Uh, One thing I thought of, and this is early on, but I think there's enough time to start making noise about it. One of the things I think hurt Vessel was access to Vessel for people to make guides before it came out.
Mm.
The second Vessel dropped, the game was figured out.
Yeah.
Builds were up, and you lost a lot of that exploration,
And discovery.
and discovery. And I had a absolute blast in the press beta, playing with no knowledge, no builds, just roaming around trying to figure it out. That was such a good time. And I had a good time afterwards, coming back and playing, again, but there was a glut of content that was created because everybody, and like Diablo partners, right, were invited into the press beta to play, and there were no parameters set on what you could do, just when it could drop. And I think that hurt. I think that hurt a lot of people when it came to like, okay, so now and a common criticism at the time was the game is figured out. I'll click
Mm-hmm.
on this guide, and they're just going to walk me through literally everything. I don't have to think about how to put this character together. I don't have to think about how the synergies come into being. And this is a nice contrast to what I experienced with the press beta for Path of Exile, in which they put a 2 week moratorium on what you could post. So essentially saying like you can do a review, you can't create build guides, you can't give anything past Act 1 about what you can what you can expect, no boss guides, nothing like that. And everybody agreed to it. And as a result, people were able to go and explore, and those builds eventually did come online later on. The people who had been sitting on them had them ready to go when that deadline dropped, but it allowed for a little bit more of that exploration and a little bit more time for the game to breathe and to be enjoyed. And I think Diablo would benefit from that. Like, I'm not saying
Yeah.
don't invite streamers, like people like us. I've never made a build guide. I am never going to make a build guide. I'm never going to play for anything else outside of the ability to review it, to give my opinions on it. I think that's okay. And obviously that's a little self-serving, isn't it? But I don't think that
Oh, wow.
I don't think that sours anyone's experience. I think Diablo would benefit from that. I think this new expansion, when it does come out and they start getting people in to play it, I think that's a great track, like a great path to take. And then put streamers on camera, like having them, they'll play and they might still know it, but they're not publishing guides. You can watch them play it and see and figure out how they're being effective, but you're not going to get that glut of information that might feel like the game has already been completed before you've even started. I think that'll just make this expansion maybe land a little bit better.
That is a complaint that I did see at the launch of Vessel of Hatred that people were going through and commenting on that the game had been figured out. Well, as you had mentioned at the start of the segment, and yeah, I definitely get it. It's also one of those ones where, the game isn't always figured out. That a lot of those guides that are that are written, even though that the streamers and the guide writers put a lot of time and effort, into going through and making that content during the PTR, press betas, and things like that. That they don't have time to test everything. And so they have to kind of like make a best guess decision. And a lot of times they're not far off. But many times that those tier lists by, a month into the season has changed pretty significantly. I know, you know, season 4, Minion Necromancer, like that was like the S tier build, and it, fell pretty hard compared to what ended up being top that season. Um, uh, and so it's one of those things where it's like the game is figured out, but at the same time it's not. It hasn't been figured out. I think this season it definitely is Cataclysm, Earthquake, or Bloodwave. Probably Earthquake. But once everything is said and done, full 300 paragons with all complete 4 GA gear across the board and such. That it's that one is pretty well said and done. But there's also a lot of times where what happens when they get the build guides wrong, and that there's something that's even better that's out there that takes a little bit in order to go through and get discovered. Um, but people never even really gave it much of a chance and could have had fun with that build, but they played through. They followed their mobalytics or whatever build guide that they wanted to, and then they played for their 3 weeks and then stopped. And it's like I pick my guide, I pick the meta build, I play, I finish, and then I'm done. And like you said, there's not a lot of exploration. There's a lot of things that can be missed.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it would benefit Diablo to kind of just take that slow and measured approach, and I understand like why they didn't do that with Vessel, of like, hey, if there's a lot of stuff that comes out, that's a lot of people talking about the game, that's a lot of content being consumed, that's eyes on the product, that's people wanting to purchase it. But I think all of that exists, no matter what. It's just like, instead of a deluge at the front. You have a slow drip that builds as people are just getting more engaged. And I think like when people hit that point of friction of like, okay, I've been trying this stuff and I can't quite get it to work. I'm just gonna now I'll start searching this out because now I know it'll be out there as opposed to, all right, well, I'm level one. What should I do first? Oh, I can't find that. I don't have that right now. Okay, well, I guess I'll try this. Oh, that doesn't seem right. And again, like allowing a player, I guess a little bit more freedom by restricting information a little bit wouldn't be so detrimental. And like I said, like you don't have to ban streamers from early access. I think like that is still a very good thing. More people playing and testing and giving some feedback because those Discord forums are filled with a lot of feedback that people are
Mm-hmm.
finding throughout it. But just hindering all the content coming out, it wouldn't be the worst thing at all. And I
Yeah.
think it would be for the betterment. But we got a year. We got a year plus before that happens. But there's my plea, Blizzard. Just I'm not saying don't invite me. That is not what I'm saying. That is the opposite of what I'm saying. Just like make a hard NDA. Nothing. No build guides for 2 weeks. No story spoilers. No build guides. 2 weeks. And let it breathe. Just let it breathe a little bit. And I think that will be to the betterment of the game. Now, that being said, the bigger conversation, an hour on in, comes down to like, in some ways, looking forward, right? And what we hope to see in an expansion later, and what we tiptoed around a lot in our conversation today. Is Diablo 4 too easy? Has Diablo 4 gotten to the point, and I think we alluded to it before, that even without a guide now, the game itself doesn't have as many points of friction. It doesn't have the I need to get better, I need to find something. It's feeling very Diablo 3.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts around that? Is Diablo, I mean, don't compare Diablo to itself. Don't compare Diablo to Diablo 3, but in this current version right now that you played, does it feel too easy?
Oh, I mean, as playing a Bloodwave Necro, yeah, for sure.
Right.
But as I was going through and mentioning that, like it is, but it isn't. You know, if it wasn't for the fact that the Destroyer tier required Torment 4, which kind of goes against things that the developers had said, going into Vessel of Hatred, is that you can play the game the way that you want, that, Torment 4 isn't required, that Torment 4 is there to be more efficient with your playtime, but you can still complete anything and do anything that you want to do in the game on the lower difficulties, except now in this season you have to complete Destroyer specifically on Torment 4. And if you're not following any type of build guides, well, there are items and things like that that you can kind of like just luck into, that let me try this thing, especially with the armory and respecking, is a hell of a lot easier now, to go through and change your build. That's no longer, a point of contention, but also goes into your point that makes the game a lot easier. Of you're not locked into anything and can freely change, your build depending upon what you want to do, or if you had a piece of gear dropped, you can instantly like, I want to try that, and let me swap everything around to go through and try and build something around that new piece of gear. Um, that there is still, like, as they go through and it seems like this particular season they're shifting kind of like that mentality to be, like, everyone will get to Torment for everybody, so let's make some of the difficulty around like the seasonal challenges around that and such, because it's so easy now for anybody to get there. But if you're not playing like an optimized build, or you play into like the meta of what drops, it can be difficult if you're just trying to like put together something, jank, or your own individual build. It can be a really big struggle just because everything is based upon stacking, multiplicative modifiers. And oh, sorry, you only stacked 10 multiplicative modifiers, but in order to play at, T4, you have to stack 15 at a minimum. Doesn't matter what they are, you just have to stack 15, and that's all that matters. And if you do that, yeah, sure, like the game is like really easy, in that respect. But it's, I know you told me not to compare it to Diablo 3 and such, but it is a very like similar issue that was in Diablo 3, that if you're not playing a set, you're not playing something that's been specifically like designed or redone or revamped, um, then you're going to struggle. But if you are playing something that has, even without a build guide, if you are playing something that has been recently like revamped or retouched on, then yeah, you're gonna breeze through everything like easily.
I like your comparison there to Diablo 3, and I know we said we wouldn't do it, but fuck it, we make the rules here.
Yeah.
Um, because that was exactly what I was thinking. Diablo 3 could be really challenging if you weren't using sets. If
Hmm.
you didn't use a set, everything would be a lot harder because you'd be missing out a lot of stuff. And we talked about it earlier, but with Diablo 4's kind of movement, we very much do have sets. Like there's very much like you pre-programmed gear for builds to be optimized. Like the Bloodwave Necro, coming back to it,
They're,
you get those pants,
those pieces just aren't green. That's
right?
all that it is, really.
Yeah, if those were green, if those pants were green, if Fast Blood was turned your amulet green, you would
Hmm.
have a set. Now this build fully functions the way it is most effective because of that. Now by the difference between the set is that's pre-programmed gear that you knew would drop, or you would get it in your seasonal journey or Hadrig's
Or you
gift,
would,
right?
yeah, or it'd be even something that you would have one piece drop, and you could see what it would do if you got the other pieces, and it set you on a direction to go through and find.
Right. And now what you have is an aspect system, which you would grab the aspects that coordinate with that particular skill, and you could just type in blood wave or blood and put those onto the pieces of gear, which does allow for a little bit more choice and a little bit more room, but it is still very much now set based, right? It is, and like you could see that happening early in Diablo's life cycle, like with the druid in particular. Um, I'm blinking on the helmet off the top of my head.
Oh
Um,
yeah, the I
uh,
never played a druid, so I just remember it as a werewolf helmet. Yeah.
yeah. Um, Somebody will post it, or I'll think about it in like 10 minutes. Like the second we sign off from this podcast, it'll come into my head.
Thunder's
Uh,
Fury, something like that. Thundercat's
well,
Hoe. Oh,
mm,
I
it'll
got it.
come up. It'll come up. Um, but with that, it effectively brought your build online because now you are a werewolf casting lightning bolts, and it didn't work until you had it, and everything felt bad until you had it. But once you did, everything started to come together. But that was early. That was one piece. You could still have builds that you could kind of mix and match, and it would be okay. But now we're there. We're at the point where every build has those items that you get them, and then you are crafting sets essentially at this point. And then, as you mentioned before, then everything gets pushed up to that tier four. Now tier four is just the universal standard. When in Vessel it was like, all right, we just get the torment, and everybody's gonna be fine on torment. Now it's like, no, torment four, and everybody's going to be clearing it. There's going to be little friction to get there, and you're going to be okay. And I think like a lot of the friction of the game um, has been worn down. It's been
Mm-hmm.
smoothed away, And that's where you get a season that feels very done after 2 weeks, right? That you don't feel as much drive to kind of go. And I think of like the going back to Loot Reborn, there was so much joy in like finding items and crafting a little bit and trying to get things to work as you wanted them to. It felt like we were in a good place there. There was some good balance. And there were a
Hmm.
lot of like good avenues to take this, and I just don't think they capitalized on that. I don't think that they turned that into more meaningful mechanics. It was just like, oh, well, everybody likes to do double casting. Everybody likes to do these. So let's just make that standard. Let's just make that like why let's get rid of those choices. Let's not give more interesting choices. Let's just give more multiplicative choices so that you don't have to think about it. And then those just kind of cascade and those just kind of stack and we're back to trillions and billions of damage and again no friction. And we talked about this on the not podcast that did get posted, but like there are great bosses in Diablo. There are some really cool bosses in this game with interesting mechanics um, that are fun to fight,
Hmm.
but you never see them because
Yeah.
the game scales you
I,
so far ahead. And I understand that a Diablo game has never been about bosses, but that doesn't mean that a Diablo game can't be.
it it's funny to kind of like to prove your point in that people feel sorry for any of the classes that need a unique off of Andariel because she's the like the worst boss to fight because she has that you can't skip the phases. You have to interact with the mechanics. And everyone's like, "Oh, that is terrible. I have to actually interact with the boss. Who does that? Who wants that?" Whereas at the same time, we're talking about like I just recently replayed through the Vessel of Hatred story, and there was like just like a little, I can't even remember what the name of it was, but there was like one of the hollow bosses that you fight out in the tangle in the jungle. That was actually like pretty interesting. Like one of like the little like mid story boss fights, and it's like what why don't we see that minion or that kind of like enemy type used again or the dog fisto wolf fisto fight which was absolutely amazing or Asterath come back into the game. There's a lot of interesting fights that we could see that brought back and mechanics brought back, but everything is about speed. People uh people would complain that the dialogue for dungeon events, I have to sit here through this 2 seconds of dialogue. This is killing my gains, man. This is absolutely destroying my run. And so everything is about speed. How fast that I do it instead of about the actual experience itself.
Tempest Roar. Um, sorry,
Didn't even have the word thunder in it. I was
yeah,
really far off.
I had Roar. But Diablo, like we go back, Diablo 2 was about killing bosses as quickly as possible to get that loot.
Mm-hmm.
Diablo 3, similar, right? Like bosses were never the major thing. You could argue Ubers maybe in D2, but that was like late, and even then, like you try to
I mean,
go.
early into Diablo 3, Ubers were, those were fights.
You know,
Those were interesting, engaging fights.
so I get, and I'm gonna put nerd words back in here because his argument last time, and I think it is valid, is that a lot of times like Diablo is not about that. It's not about
Yeah.
long-winded fights. It is kill the boss as quickly as possible, get the loot, rinse, repeat. But it doesn't have to be. I think like there is that fine line of like if we are pushing too fast and doing billions and trillions of damage, then like it just doesn't bosses just don't feel right. Um, I I think like back to like the D2 days, like early early on, eh, I never felt like that. I never felt as overpowered as what I am now. Uh, There were still times going into fights where I was like, oh, I could still die here. Like there's still a risk somewhere. I'm not getting that as I pop into Duriel's room. I'm not getting that as I the only fight that I think I can die to is Lilith because of that
Yeah.
mechanic. And that is a mechanic that has nothing to do with the boss. It has everything to do with just like the not paying attention to the zone. That's room for improvement. That's room for something in the ideally this roadmap of like bosses just don't feel as good, right?
Yeah.
These numbers are ridiculous, and the game is almost too easy. Now,
Mhm.
that being said, there are a vast majority of people who don't listen to this podcast. There's a lot of people that don't listen to this podcast.
I think you covered it with vast majority.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So
The
there are
vast overwhelming
the an
majority of people.
overwhelming majority of people
Yeah.
do not listen to
Absolute
this
soul
podcast.
crushing majority. Yeah.
I had a point somewhere there, but now I'm just sad, and that's okay. No, but the majority of people who played this game, who played Diablo 3, don't engage with Reddit, don't engage with this podcast, don't engage with streamers, don't do anything. They just go and they play, and I think Diablo excels at that. It definitely very much excels at the casual market, right? Of like
Yeah.
it is very good at what it does. It looks beautiful while it is doing it. And I think that is the hard part of Diablo. I think that's the hard part of this like fandom is you have people who are just as passionate and engaged with the game on a casual level as we are on a hardcore level. And those two bases are so different in what they want from the game. And I think like the people in our space, right, burn out of the game so quickly because we want to throw ourselves into the game for so many hours. And Diablo right now can't give us that. But on the flip side, the people who again are just as passionate in a casual way have more than enough. They're eating really well. And how do you balance that? How do you make an ARPG that excels in both of those areas?
Yeah.
And I don't know, and that's why I'm not a developer.
Yeah.
But what I can say is I do think that is an issue for Diablo, like going forward, of like your most hardcore people that love this game, that play this game, that stream this game, they're not full. Like your buffet is empty. They need more. And I think that's the challenge. And that will, unlike the economy, trickle down to those casual people because that's more for them too. Like there's more there for them to enjoy if it's also, getting spread out. And the other part too, any game has a hard time with endless content. Like if you have people playing your game for 18 hours a day for multiple days, that's a lot. Like that's a lot to have in a game. Um, but this was a season that I think like you didn't need to do that. You didn't need to put in 18-hour days. Um, you didn't need to push. Like if we look at like there was at one point this game had a race to world first. I got to shoutcast the season 2, and it took 24 hours to get to level cap, to get to 100. It did not take you a full day to level a character to 60. It doesn't take you a full 24 hours to get a character up and going in half your Paragon levels. It
Mm-hmm.
it the amount of content has in some ways shrunk because of that power scaling. So I think that is a very big challenge going forward.
Yeah, and again, the nerd word's not here to make his point, but like one of the things that he had to say last time was that Diablo was never that game.
Yeah.
Never has been that game that offered like challenging content. It offered fun, repetitive content that the fun of it was to see how fast you could do it. And it was never there. The challenge was like, never there. Maybe the challenge was always in the first time that you did it, you know. I like I remember like, beating Mouthy L for the first time on hardcore. I remember beating Diablo on Inferno pre-nerf on my energy shield wizard. Like some of those memories will be forever like etched in my brain. That it was just because of the challenge. Um, but those were like one-off experiences, and the rest of my time with like with Diablo 3 and Diablo 4, Diablo 2 wasn't engaging with challenging content. It was
Right.
speeding through it.
Right. I think like some of that too, if we go back to it, like D3 with the Inferno, the challenge was fine. It was
Mm-hmm.
the rewards that were the issue, right? There was
Yeah, you
itemization getting in the
basic
way
issues.
of the fun, where it's like, okay, I can put in this time, and I'm gonna try and kill this really hard boss, and then what was my reward for it? Oh, it was the equivalent of what I probably could have got from destroying a few pots outside of
Yeah,
a different boss's room.
yeah,
Like
farming bases.
it that wasn't great. And here we are with D4, and it's the same kind of thing of like I can kill the what is the most challenging content. I can do it real quickly, and I can get a bunch of stuff that I'm just gonna leave on the ground. Like that is a fundamental kind of reset on how items work, and like that's a big thing down the road. Not to mention like other things that we still have yet to see come to fruition, as we're looking for this roadmap that'll eventually be discussed.
Mm-hmm.
At one point we were going to get new Paragon boards, like new ways to build your character, and
Mm-hmm.
we haven't seen that. The only new Paragon board we got was from the Zero event, right? Well, yeah.
Yeah,
And that was it. Like we haven't had those kind of things. And we're talking about like shifting things up and adding new intrigue. If we're not going to get new skills, getting new boards and new ways to build a character, that also adds to that longevity of like something different to play with, and something
mm-hmm.
to kind of experiment, and we're missing that too. So
I and I don't know if like other classes have similar issues, but I know for like the Necromancer, it's also one of those ones where it's like you pick like for most builds, you really only have two, maybe at most three boards that you actually care about, like the legendary node, and then everything else is just a glyph slot. You know,
right. Well, I mean, like as
yeah,
I said, I spent, especially this season, I had like 40 points that I just didn't. I was like, I'll do that later. I will state, I still hate the Paragon system. You were talking about the armory before. I was like, I haven't even used it. I'm not going to. You know why? I'm not going to click
'cause
the
you're
Paragon
not gonna
board
click, yeah, those 200 little
200
buttons again.
times.
Yeah,
I'm not going to do that because that just feels tedious. It's so much. For such little return. Like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'll just lock into this build, and if I make a mistake, tough. I'll deal with it later. Not going to worry. Not going to worry about that. But yeah, there is a lot. I think this roadmap for what the year will bring is. I'm excited. I want to know what their goals are. Like, hey,
hmm
we knew Loot Reborn was going to happen. Uh, are we going to get itemization 3.0? Are we going to get Paragon 2.0? Are we going to get Skill Tree 2.0 before we go to an expansion? Those
will we have to wait for the expansion until they do an item squish again? Again?
because the first time was notable.
Yeah, they they divided by zero or something on that item squish because the numbers went the opposite direction.
Yeah, and well, I think the other part too is we have seen so many bugs that have come in. That maybe like this additional time before another expansion to like squash a lot of that. We've yet to
Hmm.
have a season where trading hasn't been disabled. We've yet to have like anytime something new comes into D4, it has to be locked down at some point. We had the armory locked down this season already. Um,
There was, I mean, yeah, I think the armory was because it was like crashing people, but there was a couple of witch powers that were like scaling infinitely that had to be disabled while they fixed some bugs in the back end.
right. So there are these things that it's like that ideally get cleaned up, and like then once your house is in order, then start building. Kind of build the other pieces so that it isn't there isn't always a fire that needs to be put out. And I'd imagine there's always going to be something, but uh, when one of the selling points of a new season is getting shut down, or like trade is getting shut down, like that hinders a lot of that play. And truth be told, I don't think I've traded all. I don't think I've done a trade in Diablo 4. Have you traded with anybody?
I have pretty much played almost every single season besides like season two solo. So yeah, no, I've not done a single trade. I think season four I held on to some items for that would have like some value, some Hellbent Commander Ammies and some, Greater Affixed Golem Mastery chests and stuff like that. And they're probably still sitting on my Eternal Realm character's chest, because I just, I couldn't be bothered.
Yeah,
It's
and
not something that I care to engage with whatsoever. And it's one of those things that, like, with the crafting changes for mythics that they made for Vessel of Hatred requiring the runes instead of just requiring, like, the couple of Resplendent Sparks, like, I don't think I'm ever crafting, a mythic unique in this game until they reduce some of the requirements because I'm not going to engage with trading. And it's like, yeah, I preferred the Diablo 3 way better, where I actually could just farm until I got stuff because like the prospect of having to wait to try and get 6 jaw runes, it's like I don't have enough hours in the day to play the game that much to actually
right,
like acquire like that kind of gear. And I will get bored killing the same boss 3 times in a row, let alone having to farm 100 bosses, to get the mythics rolling to have a
right.
chance at just having it drop. That neither of those things are happening for me. So it's just, but I'm fine with it.
Well, and like the other side of it too is like you don't need them. Like you don't really
Yeah.
need it. Um, it it does feel like a little bit like to use a turn of phrase that I don't think is quite right, but like a slap in the face of like, oh, you got the whole season. Here's a resplendent spark. Awesome.
Mhm. Yeah. What can
Mm,
I do with it?
but now I need like a bunch of stuff I know I can't get. Whereas in the
Yeah.
previous seasons, getting 4 resplendent sparks it wasn't easy, right? It
Hmm.
it wasn't a guarantee. I mean, I currently, I had found right now, I think I have 2 mythics sitting there that I'm not using, and then I have 2 sparks. I got the spark from the season, and then I must have accidentally sharded a mythic, uh, just not paying attention. It probably wasn't good anyway, so it's cool. So I would have enough to craft a mythic of my choice, right?
Yeah.
In the old
Well,
old system.
yeah. Right now, I think you can get four. Because you get one from the lunar event, even though that's temporary.
Oh,
You
I
get
don't have that
one
one.
from, yeah, you get one from Lilith, one from the rep, and then one from Destroyer.
Okay, so I have 3 because went through the season journey. I
Yeah.
did so I have 3 of them plus the 2 mythics sitting there. But I do not have anything to do with them because I have maybe 2 jaw runes.
Roll the dice on crafting at the blacksmith, and if it's not good, shard it, and you got 2.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
about it. And I think like that, I would be more keen to play maybe just a little bit more. Be like, okay, I've got it. Let's see what I can find. All right, I got this cool thing. I'll play with it a little bit longer. That's a small delay for what will eventually still be the inevitable. That I will slow down, and that doesn't stem the bleeding of me, stopping pretty early. But um, here we are. We're dwelling, right? We're dwelling too much on the negative, right? It's still it was a great season.
had an
Um,
absolute blast.
yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's a good complaint. I just want more.
yeah.
I want a little bit more. Um, Obviously, I would expect in the next couple weeks, now that Rod has let the cat out of the bag, we're going to hear what that roadmap is. We can expect a mid-season patch, and I would expect to be coming back for a little bit. I still got that rogue sitting there that I want to play, but I need a reason to do it, and I'm looking forward to what's going to kind of come from that.
Yeah.
Well, we did it. Another show in the books. Hopefully, this one makes it to your ears, folks. And fingers crossed. We did some extensive audio testing beforehand.
I
We're
think
gonna
we
find out.
figured it out. Yeah.
We think we did. We will see though. So let's close it out as we always do with a moo, moo, moo,
Moo moo.
moo.